Thank you. You're far too kind for tuning in once again to a little thing we like to call the Ball on Blast podcast. As always, my name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined by my dude, Mr. Andrew Webster Webby. What is good?
Not too much, man. What a week. It was great weekend, great start to the week, a lot of good games, a lot going on, man. Hey, Embiid last night again. Just I
You
hate to
know,
start with it, but listen, we talked about the MVP race last week,
this guy,
and
man.
I think it is over. I still think it's Jokic, but like he's so good on both ends of the court, and Harden is playing amazing, and even the bench looked good last night. I know I'm very biased because listen, they do put a lot of Sixers games on TV here in Canada, though.
We
I
should
do
set an
appreciate that.
we should set an odds maker time for how long it takes Webby to talk about
I mean,
the Sixers, to start his Sixers propaganda each and every week.
I'm just saying they're a good team. They're at where they're at. Third in the East. I think that's where they finish. It's just going to be about who they play, and I'm sure we're going to get into that very soon.
Listen, I'm not mad at you. I'm just stating the facts here. I'm just stating the facts. That's all.
It's a likable team. I just like them. You know,
Okay.
now that Ben Simmons off the team, they're just so much more likable.
That's so funny. Still blaming Ben Simmons. You're still salty about Ben Simmons.
Not even salty. Like it just seemed to bring the vibe down. You know.
How do you do this each and every week? Sucker me into talking about the Sixers, even though like I know what you're doing. I'm trying to avoid it, and yet you get me each and every week right off the bat to just dive into whatever's going on with your stupid Sixers, a team that I despise because I dislike Joel Embiid. I don't know if there's an athlete that I like sports hate more than
Embiid.
Joel
I know Toronto just hates Embiid. It's great.
Well,
but what I'll say is that it's just
Mhm.
it's a reflection of the NBA. We could do this about any team because there's so much personality in each and every one of these teams. Maybe minus the Spurs.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on in the NBA, and it seems like every night something crazy happens. There's something new to talk about. There's some new controversy or performance or topic of debate that's come up. So it's just a gift that keeps on giving, Shelly. And you know what? It's there for us. Why not talk about the NBA, right?
I mean, let's be honest, right? The NBA is such a crazy, crazy sport, always giving us so much to talk about week in, week out on this Ball on Blast podcast. A day late, but never a dollar short is what I like to say. As always, lots going on. We're going to talk about the Raps. We're going to talk about the Raptors versus the refs. We're going to ask, are the Knicks for real? Ja Morant doing a little too much. Checking on the West, obviously what's going on with KD and the Suns. Big matchup this weekend. Huge weekend in the NBA. Luka and Booker beef.
Ooh, yeah.
I know Webby wants to talk about OKC. The East is going crazy. People are going wild over some very interesting takes revolving around Jokic and MVP voters. So much going on, including Ask on Blast, which we will discuss Chris Rock and the Netflix special for sure. So tons to get to, but we will start as always with your Toronto Raptors and Scottie Barnes versus the refs. I mean, a crazy week for the Raps. We know that they have a big time road trip coming up. They started off, they played against Denver. Well, they had back-to-back games in Washington. They played in Denver, and now they're heading to LA to take on the Clippers late Wednesday night, and then the Lakers on Friday.
So red hot Lakers team. Like red hot Lakers team that is playing amazing, and Anthony Davis is like, I mean, this is a team that needed. Like it now almost seems that LeBron James is pulling those puppet strings.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, the foot injury is a foot injury. You know what? But getting that timetable of like 2-3 weeks. Do you think it's any of like LeBron James thinking to himself, and the Lakers thinking to themselves like, we really need to see what we have in Anthony Davis here?
Yeah, I think LeBron is definitely kind of testing the waters to see how things go with just AD and what this team can do without him. I'm not going to put any allegations towards LeBron James, but I'll just say this. I feel like my guys at home chilling, feeling kind of nice. If you see the Twitter fingers lately, just saying Bronny's better than a lot of dudes in the
people in the league.
Like,
listen, whatever kind of vintage red LeBron is sipping on, I would like some as well because that tweet was amazing.
That tweet was fuego fire. For those who might not have saw it, LeBron basically said that Bronny, he's sitting back watching the NBA and Bronny is better than a lot of the dudes he's watching, which is an insane thing to tweet. But also, I do feel like, and I've said this for a while, LeBron paid attention and saw what LeVar Ball did.
Yeah.
Right? And knows that if LeVar Ball can get his 3 kids, and because remember, Jello even got some looks, which he
Wait, he was on a G
deserved,
League team or what
right?
was I think so, right?
So that's what that's what LeVar Ball's able to do. I mean, of course, what can
LeBron's
LeBron
got a
do to
little
get
more
his son?
credibility behind him.
Totally. But before we get to the Raptors and Lakers, let's talk a bit about the Raptors and Nuggets, because that was a crazy game. And I know Raptors fans are still super fired up as Raptors lose a tough one in Denver, Mile High City, 118-113. But that's not what everyone's talking about. What everyone's talking about is the fact that the Raptors were up for the majority of that game. And then down the stretch, Jamal Murray making plays, Jokic making plays, and your man Scott Foster making some plays. I know there are a lot of questionable calls down the stretch, Webby, but I'll start here. Do you think the refs cost the Toronto Raptors that basketball game?
I don't think that they did. I think that that's a terrible call, but it's kind of in line for Scott Foster and a lot of NBA referees. It was definitely like a Joey Crawford type of thing that, and like now, obviously, with all the talk around referees, you're getting more and more discourse and like, oh, look what happened with this referee in the past and everything. But listen, as much as the Raptors fans love to blame the referees on the ills of their team, this was a game that they had under control for about 3.5 quarters. Now, even at halftime, I was like, well, I know where this is going. I don't know whether it's going to be in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, or late fourth quarter. But this 6-point, 7-point, 8-point lead that you're holding over Denver in Denver, that's going to shrink. You just knew it was going to start to shrink, and that last 2 minutes of the ball game was going to be super tight. And Murray showed up. Jokic showed up. This is what they've been doing all year. They've been winning late. They've been finding ways to win, especially at home. You're not, 4 home losses because you're because you're lucky. You know when to strike, and I felt that Denver they knew what they were getting into in that last part of the fourth quarter. The Raptors were almost playing into their hands.
Yeah.
And like a snake in the grass, the Nuggets were just waiting for their time. And then they did it. They shot amazing down the stretch. Yeah. And I know that everybody talks about the Scott Foster ejection, but I think even without the Nuggets were going to win that game.
So a few things, right? One, I want to shout Fred VanVleet. That was a great point guard performance on the road, like a leader of your team saying, I'm going to try to carry us to a victory here. He had 21 points, 14 assists in that game. Just a great performance by Freddie trying to carry the team there. Looking at some other guys, though, you're probably going to need some more from Pascal, who had 19 points on 8 of 18 shooting. And Scottie Barnes had 12 points on 5 of 12 shooting. That's not really going to cut it in a big boy game in Denver against like the reigning MVP. You're going to need a lot more from your stars. That's first and foremost. So the Raptors played a great game. But in winning time, which is what matters. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, for the first 3 quarters, they almost had the blueprint of how you beat a Nuggets team. By making Jokic work on the other end, by tiring him out, by getting him in these pick and roll situations and running them right at the big man, like wear his ass out. And that's what they were doing. It seemed like, they had the blueprint. It's just finishing down the stretch. I don't know what it was about it. You just knew that lead was going to shrink and Denver was going to strike if they let him in, and they did.
And you're right. The game plan was good. OG guarding Jokic. Jokic only attempted 8 shots in that game. He had 17 points, but the game plan on Jokic was really good. He didn't score a lot. That was good. I mean, he had 13 rebounds, 9 assists, which he's going to get just walking.
That's like a light night.
But again,
night for Jokic.
What it comes down to is what you do in winning time. And there's a lot of focus on Scott Foster, and I get that. But on the reviews, right? The plays that happened, okay? There was the one that the Raptors tried to get overturned on the screen where Jokic does the vet move of just grabbing onto Scottie Barnes and, forcing that foul call, forcing the ref's hand, right?
Mhm.
So, okay, I understand that Raptors beef. The next play where Scottie Barnes drives to the basket and he gets fouled. The initial call is he gets fouled by Jokic, but then the Nuggets challenge. And you see that on the replay, Scottie Barnes actually, with his off arm, hits Jokic's arm, and the play is overturned. That can't be a part of the Raptors' beef as to why they lost that game. That game is like that play was overturned. We're all watching the same replay. We all see what happened. Cool. But let's get to what everyone's talking about, which is the Scott Foster thing. Okay. Let's start here. So there are, we see the broadcast and what the broadcast on the broadcast live, obviously it's difficult. Like the people calling the game, you can't hear what's actually being said on the court right away. So it takes people who are watching the game and seeing all the feeds afterwards and, great Twitter follow, especially if you're a basketball fan, Worldwide Wob, all over it. He
All over
puts
it.
out, and it's later confirmed. You can hear what Scottie Barnes said to get kicked out. He said, "Y'all are cheating, bro." That's what he said to Scott Foster. Scott Foster turns around and throws him out of the game. First, is that a ticky-tack call on Jakob Poeltl fouling Aaron Gordon? Yeah, ticky-tack call. Didn't need to be called at that point. Cool. But Scottie Barnes saying, "Y'all are cheating, bro," to a referee, you're going to get tossed for that. Because I feel like there's a lot of context that people aren't really talking about, Webby. And this is why I enjoy this platform of the podcast to be able to discuss these things, okay?
I
The NBA, I'm going to say this though, the NBA is
Yeah.
making millions and millions and millions of dollars off of sports gambling, right? Every other ad is a gambling ad. So you can't have that and then have one of your players insinuate that a referee is cheating. Like there is a major difference between saying a referee sucks or you're not good at your job and then saying you are purposely trying to alter the outcome of this game. Like those are two different things, right? And I feel like we can all understand that, no?
I agree with you, and this is also a sport that's had like
Yeah.
controversies about referees fixing
And
games.
well, remember some of those fishy docs that came out. I think there was a Netflix doc that, a lot of stuff in there has been refuted in terms of
Yeah.
just not being factual. But a bunch of things that came out, we're talking about allegedly a bunch of phone calls and text messages between Tim Donaghy and Scott Foster. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
like whispers and rumblings online about Scott Foster's involvement with
And so
Tim Donaghy. So
none of this stuff exists in a vacuum, right?
none
So
of this stuff is
Scott
proven. None of this stuff is true. I'm just
but
saying with
Scott
all
Foster
those whispers
definitely is,
around.
and which Scott Foster has definitely heard
Mhm,
and definitely wants to refute. And
mhm.
so when something like this happens and he hears a player say you guys are cheating, well, that's going to trigger him, as the kids like to say now, that might
Exactly.
mean a lot more to Scott Foster to hear that than it would for maybe a younger
Well,
referee who
the other
hasn't been
younger
in the game.
referee that had the meme
Oh,
of the
that
night.
had the amazing reaction. Like, huh? What?
Those
What?
are so good.
But the
Those are
other,
so good.
and like these guys hear things all game, right? It's not just what they tee guys up for. They're having ongoing dialogue with every player that's on the court. Every player is talking to the refs, and things are being said that aren't getting booked. That I'm sure that this was not the only thing that Scottie Barnes said to Scott Foster or in Scott Foster's direction in that game, in that half, in that quarter, in those last two possessions. Like the
Exactly.
possession before, Scottie Barnes thinks that he's been wronged with the overturned call. So, like, all of these things don't exist in a vacuum and they all build up. And sure, Scott Foster's decision seems to have been like he had to cover his ass a bit with
Mhm.
why this ejection was done without two technicals being
Yeah.
award. So it seemed like he had to cover his ass. It was, probably heat of the moment, but he heard something. He has the power to do that. And yeah, it sucks, but Scottie Barnes, hopefully moving forward, knows better than to have that use that kind of language, and maybe he fixes it up. But yeah, just to
I
say that they lost because of Scott Foster is kind of short sighted.
I also just think that two things are allowed to exist in the world, right? Like, you're
100%.
allowed to say that, Scott Foster had a short fuse, and that's a tough call to have Scottie Barnes ejected at that point in the game. It's a 1-point game, like a minute left. Like, I understand all of that. But there also, I feel like, wasn't enough understanding of, okay, well, this is what he was said. This is what was said. And you have to understand why you can't have that being said on the court in an NBA game, right? Like,
The
we all
the
should
other
be able to
thing,
acknowledge that is what I'm
he
saying, right? And
right.
then I don't think Scottie Barnes helped himself post game where he said, I was just talking to myself.
As soon
Like,
as he said that, I was like, well, he definitely said something bad.
right?
And to Scott Foster. If
Yeah.
you saying that, if I put it out there on Twitter too, it's like I've said that too when I was in high school and I got detention. No, I was saying that to myself. I wasn't calling you a fucking idiot. I
Right.
was calling myself one.
And, Scott Foster, obviously they had the pool report where they asked Scott Foster about it. And Scott Foster said, quote, he directly questioned the integrity of the crew. So now, like, it's pretty obvious what happened. You can see all the things lined out. And again, you can hear it during the game. You can hear what Scottie Barnes said. Y'all are cheating, bro. So it all lines up. And I feel like it's a tough loss for the Raps, but if you're trying to take and shouts to Freddie, because Freddie's a man that says no moral victories at this point.
Right.
But the Raps hung tough in that game. They
For sure.
lost
They
in
look good.
winning
They look
time.
really good. They
That's
look
the
good.
difference between average teams and good teams, right?
Yeah.
Being able to figure out a way to win that game, especially at this point of the season where you are trying to make a push into the playoffs. Speaking of said playoffs, I want to bring up the standings here to see exactly where the Rappies are sitting at this point.
They're
But
hovering.
they're hovering, right?
It's
They're doing a
tight.
good
It's
job.
it's it's tight in that in both conferences there in those play-in tournament, like the numbers. But yeah, I guess we're still kind of waiting to see what happens with the Brooklyn Nets, right? I think that's like the ball to drop. If
Yeah.
they can tread water, stay where they're at,
Mhm.
or if they kind of if things catch up to them. But I think the Nets are playing really well too. Like for what that team's undergone. We talked about it last week, but it's a pretty like strong-willed team there.
Yeah, the Nets are doing a good job. And if you look at the standings here, the Raptors currently sitting in ninth place. And I think when you're looking at the Raps in ninth, I mean, it's one of those things where if you're the Raptors, you're trying to figure out a way in which you can try to get up to sixth, but it's looking pretty tight, right? As you mentioned, the Nets are sitting there in sixth right now.
The Heat
Raptors
are the
currently
team
at
that you're
ninth.
worried about. The Heat are the team that you would have to leapfrog, I think, to get to 6.
Yeah.
And then alternatively, you don't want to fall down to 10 if the Heat are going to be at 7,
Yeah.
right? You want to avoid playing the Heat, I think, especially in a one-game situation.
Yeah. Well, you look at those teams that are involved in the mix of what the play-in tournament would be right now, right? You mentioned the Heat, Hawks, and Washington, and then lingering not too far behind, you still got Chicago and Indiana.
And
I
India.
think that if you're the Raptors, a team that you're worried about in that scenario, you're worried about playing. You don't want to play Miami. You don't want to play Indiana. I feel like you could take the Hawks or Washington
Yeah.
despite the battles that we've seen so far this season. Tough games for the Raps against both of those teams. But it's going to be a dogfight all the way through the end of this season, I think, for when you're talking about the Toronto Raptors and where things stand. And speaking of said standings, I feel like this is a good opportunity to transition to the New York Knicks.
Bing bong.
Right? Bing bong. The Knicks are for real, right? The Knicks are currently in fifth place. They lost finally, right? Their
To the
9-game winning
Hornet.
streak came to an end to the Charlotte Hornets, of
Eh,
course, because that's
The
how it
wave
would go
the
down,
wave
right?
was only so strong and so high. The Knicks
Right.
wave was crazy. And with good reason, man. They're a fun team.
Knicks were balling, man. I mean, you got to give the Knicks a whole lot of credit because what they were able to pull off. And I know, I mean, if you follow NBA circles, you just know how the schedule kind of plays out sometimes, and you're going to be on a good run. And it's not going to be the Celtics that they're going to lose to, right?
Can be
It's
the
not going to
Magic
be, yeah.
or the
It
Spurs on a random Monday, right?
exactly. It would be the Charlotte Hornets. The Knicks winning streak, 9-game winning streak is over as they lost on Tuesday night, 112 to 105 to the Charlotte Hornets of all teams. And that still doesn't take away from the fact of what the Knicks, the run that the New York Knicks have been on with some big, big, big wins, and Julius Randle hitting some huge, massive shots.
Huge,
He had the
huge
game winner
shot.
against Miami on Friday, then Sunday, some big time shots and a double OT thriller against the Boston Celtics. I mean, the Knicks are doing everything. They got a whole bunch of guys. I feel like the pieces all fit together. That win against Boston was massive because you had quickly starting in place of Jalen Brunson, who was hurt, but quickly with 38 in that game, double OT,
Unreal.
just going back and forth with the Celtics in Boston and being able to
Yeah.
come up with that victory. My question to you, are the Knicks for real, Mr. Webster?
Yeah, I mean, right now you're looking at if you're Cleveland, if you're even Philly, that's a team in that first round that is going to be a really, really tough out right now.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that the Knicks are so where they're at right now. If you're looking at the standings, where they're at right now is such a safe place to be in. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
we talked about possibly those Brooklyn Nets falling down or kind of treading water, but they've got the carrot in front of them of catching the Cavs. So
Yeah.
they've got something to play for, but it's not like if they do lose two in a row or they go on a 5-5 stretch that it's going to kill them.
Well, the
So
other thing that's interesting about the Knicks, though, you mentioned that. Look at their road record, right? They are 20-12 on the road. Like, that's a crazy road record and very atypical for the NBA in terms of, you don't really have a team having a better road record than they have home record.
Tibbs
But
coach team, man, that's what I'd say about that, you know? Like
w-
that's the kind of guy who gets those guys ready to play on the road, you know?
yeah. And that's just also a team. The pieces just seem to fit together so well. Brunson has stepped in and been a great lead guard for them. It's also taken a lot of the pressure off to Randall, where he doesn't have to create every single play down the stretch. RJ, there's not pressure on RJ to have to like get buckets every single night and be a guy. He can kind of, you know, take a little bit of a step back, focus a lot more on defense, hit open jumpers, pick his spots a little more, and still have a solid scoring average. And I think RJ's doing a really good job with that. We mentioned quickly and what he's been able to provide, but your friend of mine, Jamie Robinson, a Knicks fan, we know he's coming up to be talking. He's brought up a really good point about Mitchell Robinson actually
I was
being
just gonna say
a
being
real key
being
part coming
healthy.
back. Mm-hmm.
Being healthy for this stretch. The last couple of years, he's not been able to stay on the court, but you're absolutely right. He takes so much pressure off of those other guys on the defensive side of the floor. He's such an important part for the Knicks. That's the awesome point.
Yeah. And I think just, him playing center, him taking some of the, banging down low with the big guys, taking some of that pressure off of Julius Randle. I think that helps so much in terms of just wear and tear and the things that Randle has to focus on, right? And if he's focusing on having to grab all the rebounds and fight the other team's big
You're
guys
doing too
and get
much.
buckets, it's so much. Josh Hart, also a great pickup for that team, a guy that
Yeah.
just fits perfectly in Tibbs' style and what the Knicks need in terms of like just a grinder. Like we talk about all those guys all the time, the kind of Jay Crowder mold, the PJ Tucker mold, the guys that are going to play defense and hit open threes, but they kind of know their role,
Yeah.
right? The
And
scrappy hustler
yeah.
guy. Josh Hart, perfect fit for
It's
this
the
Knicks team.
identity of the team, and it doesn't surprise me that a guy like our friend Jamie, who is a big '80s Knicks guy,
Mhm.
an Oakley and an Anthony Mason guy, is
Yep.
bigging up Mitchell Robinson
Yeah.
because he fits in that Knicks identity, and that's why the city is really falling in love, not only with the Knicks being good, but by them really finding that identity again that the team and the fans are used to, right? Having those guys that fit into a tough, grinding, bang body mindset. And with Tibbs, again, it's a perfect system for that. And if they can keep that identity,
Mhm.
again, really tough out in the first round. You really want to see Cleveland and New York. I want them to stay at 4-5
Oh
because
yeah. You want
that's
that
a
matchup?
that's a banging first round matchup, dude. That is like because the bigs on the Cleveland side with Mobley and Jared Allen.
Mhm.
Ooh, that would be. I'm ready for it. Just imagine Brunson and quickly going at Mitchell, or yeah, Donovan Mitchell and Garland.
Yeah.
Like that is. We need to have the Cavs come out in those old school like blue unis.
Yeah.
To take it back to the early '90s days, man.
But also just the spice of all the talk from the offseason that Donovan Mitchell was supposed to go to the Knicks,
Go to the
right?
Knicks, right? It's an added like story level to it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And like the Knicks not pulling the trigger on that deal that probably I think it was the rumors that were floating around was essentially RJ Quickly and Mitchell Robinson and picks
Yeah.
for Donovan Mitchell. And now just think about how much the pieces fit now as opposed to if they had made that trade for Donovan Mitchell, like a backcourt of Donovan Mitchell and Brunson. I don't know if defensively that works. Plus, you're
No, and you're
losing
getting
Mitchell
rid of
Robinson
the
in the middle.
guys. Yeah, and you're getting rid of some glue guys and some, like we said, Robinson has been just stay healthy, man. Like he's such a beast.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing going on there. But I'd be crazy if I didn't mention one other thing that went on in the Eastern Conference this week that I know you're going to love to talk about. Speaking of the Cavs, they were in a crazy game versus the Boston Celtics. And down
Oh,
the stretch, your
oh,
man's Grant Williams goes to the free throw line and he gets fouled. There's like 0.8 seconds left on the clock, tie game. He goes to the free throw line. Donovan Mitchell starts talking mega trash to him. And you can see Grant Williams say to him, I'm going to hit both. I'm going to hit
both.
both.
You get both.
And then what actually did he do, Mr. Michael?
Clang, clang, like Big Ben going off at 2 in the morning. Two big
Oh, man.
clangs, bro. Bro,
That's
Grant Williams, you talk about Embiid. Grant Williams might be my least favorite player in the NBA. That
wow.
guy sucks. And he talks a lot.
Oh, man. Really,
Anytime that
Webby,
guy
you're
puts
going
up a
at him that
shot, I'm like,
bad, eh?
that's not going in. That's not going in.
You could just tell it wasn't going in.
Yeah.
That's so good. It was just so funny that Grant Williams talking so much trash that he was going to make both and then ends up making neither. Like I
Nada.
thought that was just hilarious on
Nada.
so many levels. And I think that, for you to have the audacity that you're going to talk so much trash and do that and have everyone see it and be like, you're going to miss both. I just thought that was the funniest thing that like it's not even like my guy went up there and was close. Like the first one, I think front rimmed, and then the
Yeah.
second one, I guess, kind of rimmed out. But I think
The
the
first one,
interesting
you
part.
knew he wasn't going to make the second one, though. It was so off.
Well, the
He was,
other part, the low key crazy part about it, if you watch what happens on the second free throw, so he misses the first one, but then like you see a bunch of Cavs guys start moving around to like waste time because they're making you think about it a little more,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah.
And you see guys like cheat and they go back across the lane to like just add more time and they have a
Talk a
close up
little
of Grant Williams,
strategy. Yeah.
right? And you can see someone check in and then they go line up and then they're going back and forth across while my guy just has to stand there and think about the fact that he just missed
That rim gets smaller and
and I
smaller
can't
and
miss the next
smaller.
one, can I? Right? Poor guy. Poor Grant Williams, man. But hey, Celtics, they've been on a bit of a little downturn here with some tough losses down the stretch themselves. But
Yeah.
Eastern Conference is just going crazy right now. But I feel like if I say going crazy, there's another direction I got to take this pod. And it's to your man's Ja Morant.
Why?
I mean,
Oh man, why is it these? You know,
where do we even start with
Ja
Ja
comes from
Morant?
a good family. This like
So
why
there's
why
there's
do you
there's
think he?
a lot of sides to this. Let's just start with explaining kind of what's been going on, right? There's been a bunch of different issues popping up throughout this season, or I guess like as things started to happen this season, we started to hear a bunch of stories
That had happened.
that
Yeah,
had
little
happened in the
blips,
past,
almost little blips that you
right?
wouldn't
Little
think when they
blips.
happened that were part of a pattern.
Yeah. Right. And if we break it all down from the beginning, John Morant, or the beginning is how this story popped up, right? There was a story of, if we just go to this season, there was something that happened after Grizzlies Indiana Pacers game
Pacers game.
in which the Pacers reported allegedly, that they were on the team bus and there were lasers being pointed at them while they were on the team bus, with the insinuation that,
On the beam.
the beams on the guns being pointed at, and the NBA investigated that. We still haven't heard the finality, what's final from that investigation. So that's one story. Then a story leaks about how Ja Morant had a basketball game at his house and has just, sometimes he'll have like local kids there. He'll have different people come through and play. I heard like even Mike Miller was there, but a 17-year-old kid, and this is all allegedly, and you can read it all online. These stories are all there. They all exist. Ja Morant has gets in an altercation with a 17-year-old kid. And the way that the two different stories are told, from the kid's angle, the kid says that he checked the ball to Ja Morant. Ja Morant missed the ball and it hit him in the face. Ja Morant's story is that he checked the ball to the kid. The kid threw the ball at his head on purpose and then like lifted up his pants, like, made the aggressive step forward as if he was about to do something. Like, if you're watching the video, I could I'm not going to act it out, but you know what I mean? When you aggressively grab to like pull up your pants and step forward towards someone, like you're ready to go.
Take the watch off.
So that's Ja Morant's story. And he said when that happened and the ball got thrown in his face, that was essentially the first quote unquote punch. And so Ja Morant proceeded with one of his buddies to also allegedly beat up this kid.
Don't hit a 17-year-old.
And on the way out, both people are talking back and forth. And, the kid says that Ja Morant tried to pull a gun on him or flashed a gun at him. Ja Morant says that the kid said he was going to come back and light the place up. Insane story. And right when you think it couldn't get crazier, another story pops up about that happened, I guess, last year, where Ja Morant's mom got in an altercation at
sneaker store,
a mall like shoe store. I was gonna say a brand, but I didn't want to say the wrong brand. Just in case,
exactly.
not trying to give them bad pub. But they're at a shoe store, gets in an altercation, and then she calls Ja Morant. Ja Morant shows up with a crew of dudes and is threatening these employees and mall security. And supposedly there were guns involved in that as well. So police are investigating that. And then, I can't believe how many and thens there are, but this has been the week in Ja Morant news. We wake up in the morning and there's videos online of Ja Morant shirtless in a strip club and flashing a gun. I don't know where this story is going next, but the latest that we've heard is that Ja Morant is taking a leave away from the team.
He's not
At first,
playing.
it was announced that it was going to be 2 games, and now we're hearing that it's kind of indefinite. We're hearing reports that they're investigating about whether he had the gun on a team plane, because if that's the case, there could be a bigger suspension coming.
Yeah, it's
this
something
story
about
is just
having
so many
the
twists
gun
and
at the
turns. Webby, what do you make of this, man? What do you make of all of this?
It's not a good pattern, and you know what? This seems like it was the team stepping in to put him on ice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that while nothing has, for sure happened, nothing, this is all allegedly. You've been saying it, allegedly.
Yeah.
Listen, 20, 30, 40 years ago, stuff like this would be swept under the rug. Okay? Probably to the detriment of Ja Morant's career.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you will about the culture that we're living in now. This is the right thing for Ja Morant, is to be put on ice a bit, is to take a step back, find somebody that this guy can talk to, like a former player, somebody whose career didn't reach the potential that it could have, because that's what it's seeming like with Ja Morant right now.
Yeah.
The guy was poised to become one of the faces of the league, one of the most exciting players on the court, seemed like an awesome dude off the court, had his dad who looked like Usher sitting with Usher courtside, seemed to really be a darling, and it really seems that some poor decisions are ruining this for him. So for the team to step up and not the league to say, hey, man, take some time. Like, I don't think it should be seen, and I don't think it is being seen as a punishment for this guy, because I don't think that's what he needs. I do think he needs to take some time and to figure it out, because right now this is becoming a pattern.
Yeah. It definitely is. And there's a lot going on and a lot of just wild takes being thrown out by people on TV and, talking about his crew and he needs this and he needs that. And it's so interesting to me the things that people try to throw out without fully having an understanding of what someone's life is. Like, we don't know what's really going on in Ja Morant's life,
No.
but also the like, just instantly just put it on just his parents or just put it on his dad or put it on his friends. Like, it's just a whole circle of things. I think that people need to take a step back and all look at themselves and think, what can I do to help this situation? And that's everyone from the team, that's from Ja Morant, that's from his dad, that's from his crew,
Yeah.
everybody involved, right? Because there's a bunch of people playing a role in what happened. But first and foremost, if you're the Grizzlies, I think it is a good call, as you said, to have, Ja take a step back for a bit and kind of just reassess what's going on, like what, the priorities are here. Cause the latest here we're seeing from Shams saying that this could be an extended absence, something that could be for the foreseeable future. More stringent penalties could come from the league, could come from the police as well.
Yeah. The
Um,
gun in the club, I think, is the thing that they're really worried about, because if the charges come down for that, that's not good, as we saw with, like, it reminded me of Plaxico Burress when I read it, you
Well,
know?
I did see a quote from Plaxico Burress that did say, like, you know, if you can't learn and if you can't learn anything, learn from me. I saw that quote floating
Yeah.
online from Plaxico during a radio interview. But I just think, at the end of the day, too, with this Ja Morant thing, I feel like he needs to take a step back and kind of figure out what his priorities are, because he's in a tough spot. He's a kid, right? And
Yeah.
as a kid, you've now been given this like leadership role for not only a multi-billion dollar corporation, as you mentioned, he was about to be the face of the NBA or one of the faces of the NBA, but then added being the leader of a franchise, then added being the leader of your family, right? Like, that dynamic on
It's a
its
lot
own
for
comes with its
anybody, let
own.
alone how old is he? 23, 22?
Yeah, right. And that all comes with its own different responsibilities, its own different layers. And you're trying to figure out how to, grow up and become an adult with all these other extenuating factors. It's a difficult spot for him to be at. And, it's a generational thing. I also feel like it's kind of weird for even, I'll say, people our age, but even people older than us, to be commenting on, like, it's easy for us to look and be like, and I say it all the time, like, oh, these kids just doing it for the gram,
Yeah.
right? Like, and we say that all the time jokingly, but we also don't understand what that era is like now for these kids and what
And then
they're
you put the
doing.
pressure of being a professional NBA player on top of that. It's yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, man, like, things aren't ever black and white. Like,
Mhm.
things can exist in multitudes,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that the best thing, we gotta find out what the best thing for Ja Morant is, and Ja Morant has to figure out what the best thing for Ja Morant is, and that's what the most important part of this story is. It's
Yeah,
not
I
when is he
totally
gonna
agree.
come back, what does this mean for the Memphis Grizzlies? You, like you say, you gotta keep it in context that this is a 23-year-old kid.
Mhm. I'm trying to find the tweet now, but there was a tweet from Paul Pierce that Paul Pierce put up. And, Jalen Rose had a really great clip as well on NBA Countdown. But Paul Pierce said, I don't care what y'all say about Ja. I carried a gun after I was stabbed.
Yeah,
Y'all
yeah,
don't know what he going through. Everyone's got something to say until you really know what's going on in someone's life. When you're black and rich, you're a target, period. And it's an interesting, that's one of those things where, for people who might not remember, Paul Pierce was stabbed. I mean, he almost died, right?
yeah.
He probably, for all intents and purposes, should have died, and was lucky to have his life saved after being stabbed multiple times in a nightclub incident early in his career. I want to say, was it his rookie year? I don't exactly remember, but it was very
I
early on
think
in his
rookie year,
career.
yeah.
And, again, we sometimes, especially in Canada, right? Gun laws are different, the carrying laws are different, but even from state to state, those laws are different. But the lifestyle of some of these people it's so tough to just sit on a high horse and then make these judgments about someone with a gun and why does this person have a gun and why does this person need a gun when that's not our lives, right? And like I
Right.
think it's more a chance to, instead of condemning and just being like, Ja Morant, you're an idiot, you should do this, you should do that, blah blah blah. It seems like there's a need for help, right?
Yeah.
There's a need for compassion. There's a need to try to figure out, okay, well, what's going on here? Where are the OGs? Where's like Zebo to come in, right? Zebo's a guy with Memphis ties, of
Zebo
course.
would be
Zebo's a
the
guy,
first guy, Zebo and Tony Allen. I'd
right?
be on the phone with those 2 guys right now and say, "We're going fishing, Ja
Yeah,
Morant, for 5 days."
yeah. And hey, here's the thing: were the Grizzlies winning the championship this year, anyways?
They
But like the point, the reason
who's
I'm
to
bringing
say they
this up though
wouldn't?
is just the reason I'm bringing this up though is more so to say they got to figure out their priorities right now.
Well,
And clearly,
again, Ja is 23. You have
mhm,
nothing but promise in front of you. You got a good young team, but I think that that's what this decision kind of plays into as well. I think that the team realizes that as well.
yeah, it's like take the time now, figure out what's going on, figure out like what Ja needs right now to sort of, settle down, take some time to reflect, figure out what's next, figure out what the priorities are. And as an organization, this season, whatever, figure out, you got to think about next season, the year after, the year after, the year after. That's what is more important, not only for Ja Morant's life, because the other part is if it sounds like we're being super serious about this, Memphis is a different world,
Yeah,
right? Like that is a,
big
a
time.
different world to be rolling around with guns and as a rich person and flashing your chain and all that stuff. With what's going on in the world, man, it's kind of scary. And there could be a moment here to really stop and figure some things out, Um, but yeah, I kind of want to switch gears here, and there's no easy
Yeah,
segue into
right.
just
Yeah, what's the
normal
segue? Talking
basketball
about
stuff,
shooters, let's talk about Kevin Durant.
right? Like, I mean, what's the normal segue to go from there? But we will go to that game here. I got Luca versus Book, and
This
I mean,
I'll tell you. Here's your transition. Here's your segue.
oh geez,
One beef that won't end in gunfire.
true. That is
Luca and
very
Devin
true.
Booker.
Very true. Well
Okay,
played there. Well played. Solid job there, Webby. I love it. I love it. Um,
but
a
one that
wild
I'm very
weekend of
invested in.
basketball.
I like it. I like
Mhm.
it.
Yes. Right. Let's get back to the jokes, get back to the fun. And, we'll touch on the serious stuff, but we want to also talk
And
about
like
just,
our best to John Morant. We want to see him out there. We want to see him strive and like you say, grow up and be in our lives in the NBA because man, on the court, the guy is like the number one guy right now that when he does something, it's on the group text.
yeah. And
It's
the
like,
kids all
holy
love
shit, did you
Ja.
see what
The
this
kids
kid
all
did?
love Ja. That game where he came into Toronto, there were so many kids in Ja Morant jerseys. Like he's the next wave. So we just want to see the best for him for
Yeah.
sure and get back on the court to the silly beefs on the court with Dylan Brooks, right? Trying to beef other teams in the league, including the
Square
Suns
one.
and the Mavs, who happen to face off on
Yes.
Sunday in a crazy back and
Oh,
forth game. Kevin Durant versus Kyrie. KD just, hitting massive shot after massive shot. And I tweeted this out during the game. Like, you can't really stop Kevin Durant. He just misses shots. Like we
yeah.
saw what the Celtics did to him last year in the playoffs where the Nets got swept and they kind of, shaded their whole defense towards KD to make him go against basically two defenders the entire time, two if not three defenders the entire time. And even still, there's a counter to a game plan that maybe Steve Nash wasn't able to come up with. But when you watch KD one on one, you can't stop him. He just misses shots, right? Like that was an incredible performance of shot making by Kevin Durant on Sunday. Did you catch a bunch of that game or no?
Yeah, and I've been trying to watch as much KD on the Suns as I can. I think they're playing their first home game tonight, right, with
Okay.
Kevin Durant in the lineup. So hopefully that'll be on Canadian TV. I haven't checked the guide, but the guy is like we talk about these terms like game breaker, difference maker, and as much as we love LeBron, as
Mhm.
much as we love talking about guys like Embiid and Jokic and Giannis, I don't think there's anybody in the NBA that like teams need to deal with more
Yeah.
than Kevin Durant. Because like you say, You can put bodies on Giannis when he tries to spin into the lane. You can
Mhm.
try and wear out Embiid and Jokic as bigger guys you're going to wear down. Kevin Durant will get his shot no matter what. And like you say, the only way it's not going in is if he misses it. It's
Yeah.
not because of the double team, not because of the help that you sent on the week, whatever. No, he's going to shoot over you. He's 7 foot. He's still as good of a scorer as he was going back to Brooklyn, going back to Golden State, even going back to the Thunder. He's doing what he does, and he hasn't stopped other than the injury slowing him down. But if he stays healthy, he's gonna make the shots. And
That's a great
pairing him with Booker and Paul now, that's already a pretty devastating offensive team. And it's just like adding another queen on the chessboard by putting Kevin Durant out there.
You know what, Webby? It's such a great point by you because Kevin Durant, the way that he can be a superstar and fit into like any team situation, right?
Yeah.
And still like get his shots while not hogging the ball, while not taking too many shots, just knocking down whatever shots come to him in the flow of the offense, whether it's threes, whether it's twos, whether it's crunch time. And pairing that, like Devin Booker now moving into your second best shot maker and creator and playmaker, and then having Chris Paul with this bevy of options because, now dumping it down to Ayton is like
Ayton,
your
yeah.
third
The
option.
only thing is now you don't who's your fifth, sixth, seventh guys because of what you gave up for
Mhm.
Durant. But at this point, it's like, who cares?
Well, there's a bunch of teams in the league right now that made moves, and even whether it's the Raptors and like a guy like Will Barton, right? Like there's different levels to this,
Buyout
obviously.
guys, yeah.
But what we're talking about is with the Suns, the time now between now and the end of the season is figuring out who those 5, 6, 7, 8 guys are going to be, what that rotation is going to be, because you have guys like Damian Lee, Terrence Ross, like guys who can play, guys who can hit open shots, play defense. Can they find their role within this team heading into the playoffs? That's what this time needs to be used for. If you're Monty Williams and the Suns, who's going to come off the bench and play defense and be able to hit open threes, once Chris Paul drives in the lane and KD's guarded and Booker's guarded, right? Those are the things that I'm super interested to see how that plays out in that game. But please give us Mavs and Suns in the
Talk about a
playoffs.
4 or 5. We talking about Knicks, Cavs in the East. Like, give us Suns, Mavs in any way, shape,
The
or form.
KD Kyrie would be awesome watching them
You,
go toe to toe, but then Book versus Luca, which has been spicy since last year's playoffs.
just the leaning in, that meme of him leaning into Booker, like, well, it
So
was
good.
it's so good. Now, the only other thing that I will say about that game on Sunday was that Luka was obviously not right. Whether it
Mhm.
was the thigh or the calf, there was something going on with his leg where he left and came back, and
Yeah.
he only I think he took 30 shots, only hit 7 or 8 of him.
Yeah.
If that's a healthy Luka playing the entire game, I think that's a different score line.
But is there ever a healthy Luca? Do you know what I mean? Like long term, is there ever a healthy Luca, or is he always breaking down at some point during the season?
I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying,
And
but the
hey, you can
guy
say the
is.
same about Chris Paul and KD and even
Well, I
Booker
was
for
gonna
sure.
say,
You're right.
when does the Chris Paul injury happen?
Mhm.
Because it's gonna come. It's come every year. And
Yeah.
then the other thing is that, I mean, we know when Luka gets in the playoffs, you can say anything you want about how much shape he's in, how banged up he is, but we've seen Luka in the playoffs be a different animal to what he is in the regular season, which is already one of the best players in the NBA. But
Yeah.
he's awesome in the postseason.
Definitely. Luca is an incredible talent, and I gotta admit my Luca bias here.
See,
Just
you're
as
a
much as I
Luka
hated
hater, aren't
watching, well, I
you're a
hated
Luka
watching
hater.
James Harden play, and it's the same thing with Luca. Like I just hate
Ah,
watching guys dribble while the other four guys just stand and watch them dribble. It's just boring basketball to
what
me, and
are
it's
you
the
talking
same
about
thing every time
assist?
down the floor.
Are you talking about assist leader James Harden?
I'm talking about James Harden with the
Are you talking about
Rockets.
assist leader James Harden this year?
Rockets James Harden, like
Okay,
those
you're not
Rockets
talking about
D'Antoni teams, right? Not the washed James Harden now that actually
washed.
has to pass the ball
Washed.
because he's too washed to
Washed.
take.
Look at his numbers over the last 2 months.
Someone
He's been one
sounds
of the best
triggered
players
right
in the
now.
NBA.
Someone sounds triggered right now. Are you okay, Wiggy?
I'm just saying that
That was too easy, my dude.
we
That
got
was
to
way too easy.
we got to turn around the narrative of playoff Harden this year, because now being on the side of watching it, it's tough.
Okay, that's fair.
But I'm trying to
That's fair.
gas up my guy.
Nothing wrong with that. The Luka versus Book beef, like I just found it funny. Booker pointing at Luke. I don't know what he was pointing at. Maybe pretending that he was pointing at the charge or whatever,
Yeah,
or if
it
he was
was
just blatantly being like, "You missed a layup." But
yeah.
either way, Luka running up on Booker, like, what are you doing? Like, you don't run up on a dude like that unless you're gonna do something. But we all know
It's
you're
the
not gonna
NBA,
do
bro.
anything.
It's the NBA.
It's so good.
It's the
It's so
NBA. That's
good.
why we need Carmelo back to just throw a slap at somebody, you know?
Oof. Mello was talking about that on your boys, $1 million worth of game, actually, your Philly boys, $1
Oh,
million
yeah?
worth of game pod. He was talking about how David Stern called him into the office after that fight happened. And he was talking about the Ja Morant stuff. But he said after that fight happened, David Stern called him in the office and he was basically like, read him the riot act, told him, like, listen, you need to decide whether you want to do that or if you want to be an NBA player. Because we know what you're doing. We know who you're with.
Yeah.
We know where you live. We know where they live. We know what they're into. And you got to decide if that's the life you want to be in the streets and do that, or if you want to play in the NBA. And Melo's like, that's when he sat there and realized the NBA is working with the feds. Like, they know everything. Like, they know, because he's sitting there thinking, like, wait, how do you know this guy? How do you know that guy? How do you know that's what that guy's doing? Right. But Stern's letting him know, like, yo, we're on
We've
it.
got
Like,
your
we got to
phone
settle
tapped.
down. Right. So he told him, he gave him a big suspension for that slap to settle him down, to be like, I got to make an example out of you. Super interesting stuff. But let's keep things going to another interesting twist and turn here, because the Jokic MVP debate keeps taking different turns. And I mean, a massive one happened just yesterday with JJ Redick and Kendrick Perkins having a massive argument, because Perkins, as much as he tried to deny it, essentially insinuated that white voters were more likely to vote for Jokic because of a bias that they have, because Jokic winning the third straight would be, unlike things that we allowed for LeBron or for Giannis or for MJ. And the last time it happened, obviously, was for Larry Bird. And also, then that brings up the Steve Nash debate of Nash winning back-to-back years, all of these things. But I don't want to dive into the race baiting part of it, because I feel like nothing productive gets done. Because no one's going to admit, even if that was the case, right? I'm not saying that it is. No one's going to admit and be like, yeah. Bill Simmons only wants Jokic to win because Jokic is white and he doesn't want him. That's not Bill's. So that argument makes no sense to me.
Right.
What I will say, and what I would like to discuss with you, is just the Jokic debate on its own, because I know we talked about it a bit last week, and I was saying, you know what? I think he is hands down the MVP, right? I was agreeing with you. With some time, and as I stepped back, and I was really going through it and looking back on some of those LeBron years and even the Giannis years, I kind of look at that and I'm like, I like those rules of, I want to see more progression, even though it's a regular season award. I want to see some progression in the playoffs before I make you the 3 straight MVP. That's a historic, legendary level that if MJ didn't do that, I don't know if I could do. And I know that sounds ridiculous. MJ didn't do it. LeBron didn't do it. And when you think of this era, I still think of it as a Giannis era more than I think of it as a Jokic era.
You don't think that we're still in the Steph era?
For sure. But I'm saying beyond the LeBron, Steph, they're the big dogs, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of who's coming up after them, I still look at that as a Giannis. Giannis is the dude just underneath the LeBron and Steph and KD, those guys with multiple rings that led the league.
Right.
You know what I mean? I still look at it as Giannis. Then you're getting into I guess the Jokic's and Embiid, and then Ja Morants and that kind of thing, right? Or the Jason Tatum's, like the guys that are coming up that still haven't won yet.
Yeah.
You know,
So what
Giannis
I'd
had to
say,
win to be able to get the full-on cosign to win twice in a row. You know what I mean? Like people didn't even want to give him twice in a row. There was a talk about, oh, remember the Harden? Oh, all you do, how difficult is it if you're just
to
running
get free
and
throws.
dunking? I don't
What
know.
I will say is that I am now, because again, last week I was the same as you. I think that it's pretty slam dunk, but that's going by, this is a regular season award that's given
Mhm.
out once a year. But I really believe, like you do, that narratives matter.
Yeah.
Okay, not as much as we try to make these awards exist in a vacuum, they do not. The
Mhm.
voters have long memories. The voters put these performances into historical context, and I think that they should. And I
Mhm.
agree with you that if you are going to give a guy 3 straight MVPs, he really has to show you that he's A, progressing his game to new levels every year, and that B, his team is getting better and better and making push for championships. Now, this year, the Nuggets team is in first place,
Mhm.
and they are the best team in the NBA. I mean, when you look at what
They're
they've done
actually
this
right
year
now second in the NBA
to
to the
the Bucks,
Milwaukee Bucks by a game.
by a game, right? It's close, and Jokic has played way more games than Giannis has
Giannis.
this year. So I still think it's his, but I do agree. If Embiid or Giannis can, like, when they've been playing, like I've been talking about it, Embiid has been on another level. And
Mhm.
if he keeps up these 30 and 40-point games with these amazing defensive numbers and the ancillary stats around them, I think he will push Jokic and get first place MVP votes.
Yeah.
But I don't think that even this dialogue that people are having in the media right now is going to change enough voters' minds that Jokic won't end up with a third MVP. But I agree with you that these things are being thought about. I just
Mhm.
think that with what the league looks like this year, with Giannis missing games, with Embiid missing games, with other candidates maybe not having as gaudy numbers, especially analytics
Yeah.
wise, with Jokic, that it just won't be in. I just don't think it'll be enough. I think Jokic will win his third.
The toughest part for me is historically being able to look back and be like, Jokic won 3 straight MVPs. And if there's no rings, no conference finals appearance, and he's not even the best player in the league, like it's a weird anomaly, you know? Like that's a strange thing. And like we're here, we're living it. So I see the world in which he should be MVP. It's just tough to put that in historical context,
It's the
right?
historical.
You
The
know?
question that's always asked is, well, okay, who is the most valuable to the award is called MVP,
Mhm.
and if you go by that, he is the MVP.
Yeah.
He is the most valuable to his team, pretty
Yeah.
much by leaps and bounds over anybody in the league.
Yeah.
So when you look at it like that, but I agree that that historical context does need to matter. And if
Yeah.
I had a vote, I mean, I probably wouldn't cast it until all the games were done. Well, there's still a bunch of games
Yeah.
left, but I that would definitely be something that I judged the MVP award against.
This is gonna sound kind of lame, but I feel like if I'll understand it if they finish first in the entire NBA. I will probably that will be the thing that I'll be like, okay. And I know that's such a slim, narrow like line to draw in the sand, but I don't know. Like I just have a
I'm
hard
there.
time
I
doing
know.
it, man. I have a
I
hard
know.
time doing it. But there's still, under 20 games left to decide all of this and figure out who will be on top in the NBA MVP voting. But we talked about the crazy week in the NBA, but maybe the MVP of the weekend
Big guy.
was Chris Rock. I'm gonna go to the. What did you think I was going to there? You didn't think I was going there, did
No,
you?
no, I knew you were
Oh, okay,
going there,
okay, just
but
checking, just
I
checking.
had a question before we get into it.
Mhm.
Is he your number one all time stand up?
Um, the way that like the timing of like Bigger
His
and Blacker
career.
and the early Chris Rock specials are just perfect, like in my wheelhouse of being old
We're the
enough to
same
fully
age. I'm there
understand and
with you.
appreciate.
Yeah,
So I will always, I think, give the edge to Chris Rock
me too.
over Chappelle. And
Yeah.
that's just me. That's a personal thing. I
Even
get it.
Carlin and Eddie, they were a little
Yeah,
bit before me, but
exactly.
we're the same age. And
Yeah.
I saw what was the first one? Um,
Uh, it's
not
bigger
back
and blacker.
bigger. What was the one before? Anyway, that I remember being like 11 years old, 12 years old, and watching that and being like, "This is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life." And since then, Chris Rock's been my guy.
Yeah,
And some of his stand-ups have been better than others. I'll say that.
for sure.
But when I heard this one was coming out with everything that happened with the Oscars last year, I had to watch it, right? I had to be in on it.
So there's a couple things that made this super interesting. One, it was the Netflix live special, which was Netflix dipping their toe in the water, trying something new, seeing like, could Netflix, a streaming service, have appointment television? Could they succeed in doing something like this? And this was kind of the perfect, you know, I guess, attempt at it, because everyone was waiting to hear what Chris Rock's response would be, because he hasn't said anything since the whole Will Smith slapping incident from last year's Oscars. And so, with huge anticipation, the whole internet waiting for it, did you end up watching it live?
I didn't watch it live.
So I forgot that it was
I'm a
coming on.
kid.
And then at about like 9:45, I just happened to like sit down on the couch. I went on my phone and people were trying to figure out how to get online. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
wait, I totally forgot this was on. So I happened to catch it live, which was an interesting thing to me, because I don't know if, you know, if that part didn't happen, I totally would have missed it,
yeah.
and which doesn't really matter. Like, there's no need for it to be a
I mean,
live
I watched it the
event.
next day, like or 2 days later, and yeah, I guess what I missed was like the people like commenting about it afterwards or something. But I
Yeah.
don't think I missed much in watching it a couple of days.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be a live thing. Like, I don't think that's necessary. I don't get the point of that really. Maybe they're just able to sell more advertising to something because it's live. You can track those numbers on top of whatever, the clicks and downloads are after the fact. But either way, let's get to the actual content of the matter. What did you think of the special?
Well, it's funny as these comedians that we grew up watching get richer and richer. It seems like we can find something funnier to talk about than woke culture, can't we? And he
Yeah,
did as soon as he started getting play the hits, g- give me jokes
yeah.
about OJ. Like that shit's hilarious. The
I
OJ
found it
shit was
funny.
hilarious.
I found a lot of the reaction funny. Like, obviously, I know that
Yeah, did you like the crowd kind of like, oh, I don't know if we can laugh at that kind of
well,
vibe.
I think like the internet culture of, you're gonna have, did he go too far? Was this mean? All that kind of stuff. Like, I get that that's what happens now in 2023, but I was kind of like over that side of the angle. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, that's just what's gonna happen. That's what his job necessarily is to poke the bear and get to the line, probably tiptoe over the line a couple times, but like, that's what he's there to do. Um, I thought overall as a special, I thought it was really funny, but to your point, it is interesting as you grow up with these comedians and they get richer. Like, a comic's job, right, is like, they take things that are relatable to everybody and
Mhm.
they put a funny spin on it and make you think about it in a different way. But if they're like stanky rich and I'm not, like, their
Yeah.
lifestyle is not necessarily as relatable to me anymore to have the same, you know, topics of, oh, divorce, and now I got to give millions of dollars to my wife.
Well,
You know what I mean?
that
Like,
was one of the better lines when he was like, "She's not funny at all."
it's so good, right? Like, there are a lot of moments I thought was really good and really funny. And, I also thought there were some points where it kind of not dragged, but like weren't as
Yeah,
good, or kind of like he
yeah,
took the easy joke,
yeah.
the easy way out. But I was anticipating how exactly he was going to talk about
The Will
the
Smith
the Will
thing,
Smith
yeah.
thing. And so when he kind of like made the jab early,
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
protecting himself and like, all that, and then made the jab a little later, you know, and then I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's not actually going to touch on it. And this is just
Mhm.
an okey doke. But then at the end, he just goes in
And it
and a
wasn't
full on
eh
assault. And I didn't think that it was so much a stand-up bit as opposed to his genuine, honest, real,
Getting
emotional
getting stuff
feelings
off
on
his
it. Like, you could tell
chest.
he felt angry about that, and I
Yeah.
appreciated that realism.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I was talking to my wife about this actually. It's like at the beginning of the special, he kind of talks about like, being a victim is a great way to get attention.
Mhm.
But then at the end of this special, he basically does 10 minutes on how he was a victim of what Will
Mm.
Smith did to him. So I kind of
Mm.
thought that was a little interesting, but then again, it was way more raw and like you say, personal and emotional about the situation that he found himself in.
Yeah.
And then did make some. He was like, he played Muhammad Ali. He's like, I played Pookie. He's like, what do you? Of course it hurts.
It was so good, right? He had some really funny lines. I mean, he messed up the joke,
The one
right?
at the end,
The
right?
one at the
Yeah,
end, he messed it
exactly.
up, but I think like
But
that.
almost that brought a little more humility to it, almost
Yes.
making him seem more relatable than he was when he was talking about his daughter going to this super elite private school and like
Yeah.
going to Portugal for fucking their grad party or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
even
yeah.
him messing up that joke made it more relatable to me and
Mhm.
probably to most viewers.
Well, yeah, him messing up the concussion joke and like the joke about going to see Emancipation to see Will Smith get his ass beat or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I thought those jokes were just okay, but I thought like the overall, like just showing how angry he was and how he kept repeating the word bitch and calling him he's like everyone was calling him a bitch this show and this show and this show. He's like, and I'm the one he hit. Like, I still think, when this all happened last year, I don't even remember if we did a pod on it or
No,
not,
I don't
but
think we did.
when this all happened last year, I remember like I like looking at all sides of things, right? So I thought, okay, Will Smith's a clown for doing that, but it is a reminder that there are repercussions for what you say, whether that's right or wrong. So I think like that's a thing where um I think that, I get it from all angles. And I think that overall, I thought it was super funny. I enjoyed it. I would
Yeah.
watch it again. I give it probably like a 7 or 8 out of 10. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's
Like, I
not
thought
the
it was pretty
worst
good.
Chris
I was
Rock
entertained. I
not the
laughed
worst
out
Chris Rock
loud.
special, not a classic, but a really interesting piece of media for these times.
Yeah, the abortion stuff I thought was good. I thought that
Yeah.
people focused in too much on whatever their targets were,
Yep.
not realizing that he went at everyone,
Yeah,
right?
which is
Like,
what
there
a
was
comedian does. It's what
exactly.
Dave's been doing forever, what Bill Burr does, what the great comedians do.
Exactly. But Mr. Webster, we could go on for hours and hours talking about all of these things, but we'll save some of that stuff for next week. We can continue and talk about whatever it is that we're watching each and
Oscars.
every week on
I'm
top
watching the
of the
Oscars.
NBA. But yeah, where can the people find you online in case they want to take some of your Mr. Andrew Webster
Wisdom.
takes from the NBA
Wisdom.
and beyond?
On Twitter and Instagram, it is the same at a Webster84. Follow me. Converse. We'll converse.
I love it. I love it. And my name is Sheldon Alexander. You can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And like and subscribe wherever you get the podcast. Bless us with the like, bless us with the retweet. If you're watching the video on YouTube, hit that like button. It's how you support everything that is this the On Blast podcast. As I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Ball on Blast podcast, part of the On Blast podcast network. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.
Peace.